12.3 and 12.4 mean, because they are contradictory. Thank you.
No. Sorry, clearly you're coming to a wrapping up speech, if I may. My Lords, I'm... Sorry? Thank you. My Lords, I'm one of those people with no connection to Northern Ireland who probably knows better than those who live there what should be going on, who was rightly criticised earlier, and so I speak only with very great hesitation. But having no connection to Northern Ireland does allow a certain amount of detachment, and I have to say that this government is turning out to be probably the most pro-consular government Northern Ireland has had for decades. I mean, even under direct rule, there was a higher level of consultation with people who actually lived there about legislation than we are seeing today. We've had legislation implementing the Northern Ireland Protocol and the Windsor Framework imposed on Northern Ireland without any consultation. Now, one might say that in that respect that was controversial legislation between the communities, and having an independent arbitrator impose the legislation was some sort of necessity, however much damage it did to the fabric of the United Kingdom. But we've moved on from that more recently to, for example, the Troubles and Legacy Bill, the legislation imposing access to abortion services in Northern Ireland, and today we have legislation about abortion education in schools. Now, in respect of the last three, it seems that, you could be forgiven for thinking that the government believed that if they treated Northern Ireland with sufficient insensitivity and disdain, and with no discrimination between the communities, they would so unite the communities in Northern Ireland that all the political problems of the past would be put aside and resolved. That at least might be thought of as a cunning plan. But I suspect the truth is much worse than that, and that what we are seeing is a loss of contact between what might be called the ruling class in Northern Ireland and the people they govern, including their elected representatives. And that is not a right or a sustainable position to maintain. Now, I rose specifically because I wanted to draw attention to the very powerful statement issued by the Irish Catholic bishops, who, of course, own and manage a large number of the schools. And I was anticipated to some extent in that by the noble Baroness Lady Ritchie of Downpatrick. But without repeating her, I think I can draw attention to a separate part of their statement, because it is not simply that they oppose this legislation and what it would require them to do. They oppose or they disagree with the fundamental basis on which it arises, which is the, as they refer to it, the recent so-called investigation of the Northern Ireland Human Rights Commission into RSE in schools. And if I may quote very briefly, they have serious concern about the accuracy and fairness of that report. Neither party took the trouble to engage with teachers in the classroom. At best, a limited paper-based exercise was undertaken, which failed to recognise that in the reality of classroom teaching, teachers and schools are endeavouring to provide professional, ethically balanced, scientifically honest, and pastorally responsible, age-appropriate relationship and sexuality formation in our schools. So it is not simply that they disagree with it; they disagree with the basis on which it sits, which adds a further ground for objection and resentment. And I do suggest that ministers should acquaint themselves very closely with this statement, because it is extremely powerful and really quite excoriating. There is a practical consideration, and I am in no sense able to speak or wishing to speak on behalf of the Irish bishops and those who manage the Catholic schools in Northern Ireland. But how, in practical terms, does the government think it can require people of with strong views on this topic to teach something which they believe to be morally wrong and objectionable. How in practice do they think they can do this? The most careful consultation would need to take place in order for this to be a practical measure. And that has not taken place. And there is no indication that the government is going to do so, because there will no doubt be consultation, but the principle of what's required, the CEDAW statement, leaves very little room for wiggle about this. So I do think ministers should take this very carefully into account. It is not simply a matter of making a law and then seeing it happen. The people you are dealing with are not civil servants who will do what they're told simply because that is their role. They have responsibilities, in their view, ethical responsibilities, not only to the teachers but also to the parents. And you cannot expect them to abandon those simply because we have sat here and allowed a statutory instrument to go through, a mere piece of paper, which has very little weight in the minds of people of religious faith compared to their ethical beliefs. So I would like to hear what the Noble Minister has to say about that.